Okay, good morning, Allison. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are
Good.
you?
I've been fighting a bug and
Oh, no.
I'm actually feeling okay today. So,
There you
even though
go.
I'm still sick, considering where I've been, I'm like, I feel amazing. I feel like I could go run a half marathon because
That's awesome.
I just
That's
have
the
been
best when you have that first
Yeah,
day
yeah. I'm
coming
like,
out of the fog.
yes,
Yes,
finally. Yeah. So,
yeah,
thank you
you
for
feel it
asking.
start to lift.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited for you to be on and share all your knowledge about sleep with my listeners. But
Yes.
before we do that, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Allison Ezell. I am a mom of 4 through birth, foster care, and international adoption.
Okay.
Um, Grew up in Dallas, Texas. I now live about 30 minutes north of there in Prosper.
Okay.
And yes, I'm a certified pediatric sleep consultant. I have a master's in education, so spent a lot of time in the classroom prior to doing what I do now.
Oh, okay.
So, honestly, it kind of fits in. I have a lot of early childhood experience. I did
Mhm.
preschool for a long time, and I did middle school, which is a weird,
Oof.
weird
Yeah.
swing. Um, so a lot of the same issues, just bigger
Mhm.
bodies.
Mhm. Yep.
Honestly, but yeah. So my background is in. I have a communications degree, background in education, and really sort of fell into what I'm doing now. I don't think I necessarily fell into it. I think I was being prepared for it for a very
Yeah.
long time and can
Yeah.
see that now. But through just a need.
Yeah.
And we can get into that a little bit more,
Mhm.
but just through a desperate need to find somebody who understood and could help me reconcile sleep issues and trauma informed parenting.
Mhm.
And I couldn't find someone that existed. No one could help me. And so I threw a lot of spaghetti at the wall, became
Mhm.
very passionate about sorting this through. And in 2021, I founded Dwell Pediatric Sleep. And so I'm about 3 years in now and have worked with thousands of families through one to ones and corporate speaking training, all those
Cool.
types of things. And so it's been a wild journey.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what I'm doing now.
Okay, okay. I'm excited to talk more about that. I would love to go back though, and if
Yep,
you're okay with it, share
absolutely.
with us like how did you go down the path of adoption and then foster care? Because
Yeah.
that's the order you went in, which
We did. Yeah,
yeah.
we did. Ironically, my husband and I came into marriage thinking we would only adopt.
Okay.
We actually didn't think we wanted to have biological children at all. I had gone through some health stuff in my
Okay.
teens that I sort of had thought would cause and had been told by many medical professionals, you will have infertility. You
Oh,
will have
wow.
problems. Well, 3 years into marriage, we had 2 biological
Oh
children. So
my
I did
gosh.
not have infertility issues.
Yeah.
But we came into marriage wanting adoption to be part of our family.
Okay.
My grandmother was actually a foster child
Mm.
and was adopted back in the 20s
Oh
through
my
foster
gosh.
care 100 years ago, literally 100 years ago.
Wow.
Very different system than what we
Yeah.
have now. She was actually in an orphanage
Oh
and
my
was adopted by
gosh.
the director, almost kind of like a Miss Hannigan and Annie situation.
Wow. Yeah.
Um, and she was separated from her brothers. And so foster care was something that I grew up hearing a lot about
Mhm.
just from her and her experience of being adopted and things like that. Well, come to find out, I married a man whose father was adopted domestically at birth.
Oh,
And
okay.
so we both came into marriage with adoption
In your families.
in our families.
Yeah.
And so we knew what a gift it could be. Hard,
Mhm.
difficult, but we knew what a gift it could be. And so we came into marriage anticipating adoption would be the way we built our family.
Mhm.
And so we, 3 years in, we had these two, healthy, biological kids. And so for all intents and purposes, check the box, we were
Mhm.
done. And then God said, haha, remember that thing that
Yeah.
you always said you were going to, just because I gifted you these children doesn't mean that's not still what I have for you.
Mhm.
And so we began, our daughter was 2 and our oldest was 4 at the time.
Okay.
And I remember we were sitting in church and our pastor said he was doing a sermon on Nehemiah and he
Mm.
said, what breaks your heart? and what are you willing to do about it?
Mm,
And so we came home from that and had lots of conversations and said,
mm.
kids without families is just something that we both felt very burdened for. I had actually worked in a domestic violence shelter for a period of time. And so I understood some of the brokenness and the
Yeah.
heart of, and things like that were going into some of these families. And so we just kind of began to pray about it. And at that time, with our kids being the ages they were, we felt that we were called more to adoption, like matched adoption, as
Okay.
opposed to foster care.
Okay.
We sat with my cousin who is a social worker, and she really walked us through, like, the good, the bad, and the ugly of
Yeah.
all types of, all pathways to adopt. And we just kept feeling this pull towards international. And so we began the process to adopt our son from China. He was born
Okay.
in China, and we brought him home in 2016. The very end of 2016, he was just over a year old. Special needs adoption,
Mhm.
and so he came home, and then we were like, nope, done.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it. We're done. We got 3 kids. They're all stair step 2 years apart.
Yeah.
Done. Right.
Easy
Um,
peasy.
oh yeah, it's fine. We got
Yeah.
3. At the time they were 1, 3, and 5, and we were like, see, we did the thing. We did it.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
done. We're done. And then kind of floated along for a while, went through a lot of sleep struggles with our adopted son,
Okay.
which is why I'm here today.
Yeah.
Um, but went through a lot with him, medically and sleep and otherwise, once he got home. And then kind of worked through a lot of those things. And then COVID.
Yeah.
And then a pandemic hit the country, and we again started to feel that burden of, okay, we're so blessed and we feel so fortunate that our kids are home and safe
Mhm.
and, healthy and all those things. But we just began to feel the Lord burdening us for kids where home wasn't safe.
Mhm.
And what about the kids where being home is not where they want to be?
Mhm.
What about the kids that that's not a safe place for? And so foster care just kind of kept coming up in it was all these little, like, what I would call God winks.
Yeah.
Everywhere we looked, we just kept seeing foster care,
Yeah.
foster care, foster care, foster care. And we were like, what is this? We said we were
Mhm.
done, And so finally, we just, one day, it had been weighing on me, it had been weighing on my husband, ironically, at the same time. And we
Mm.
finally just talked to each other about it. And I was like, I know you're going to say no. And he was like, well, I thought you were going to say no. And it kind of just became this thing that we were like, well, maybe we're supposed to do this. And so
Mhm.
we sort of took the approach, it's a yes until it's a no.
Mhm.
And so we just sort of started taking steps. And we were like, if this isn't what we're supposed to do, God will close the door.
Mhm.
And he never closed the door.
Mhm.
So we began fostering in April of 2021. We were open about 2 weeks. We were foster only.
Okay.
We really did not have any intentions of adoption. We truly just wanted to support reunification. That was
Okay.
all we wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of a place we got to over the couple of years where we were really, kind of working with some stuff with our son. We were like, okay, these are our forever kids.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we can't engage the system. That
Right.
doesn't mean we can't be a bridge,
Yeah.
a safe place for a short period of time.
Yeah.
And that's really what we wanted.
Mhm.
Laid plans. That's
Mhm.
what we wanted to be. And so we got licensed in April of 2021. 2 weeks later, we'd had 3 phone calls already. And we said yes to, I think, all 3 of them, actually. But they ended up picking other people for various reasons.
Yeah.
And then our son came to us in May of
Okay.
2021, and he never left.
Okay.
And we
Was he a
adopted him.
newborn?
He was just over a year. Actually, both
Oh,
of our
okay.
sons were
We're
13
just over
months.
you. Okay.
Yeah, both of our sons were 13 months at placement,
Okay.
in China and here through foster
Yeah.
care. Um, and so he came to us at 13 months, and about 8 or 9 months into his case, it became fairly evident that this was going to take a different direction
Mhm.
than what we had hoped and prayed for the whole time. We had hoped and
Mhm.
prayed that he would go home, that
Mm.
he would go to a relative.
Oh, that's
Um,
so heartbreaking.
it was
Yeah.
really hard. And, it kind of became obvious about that point in his case that this was going to move to adoption. And
Mhm.
so then we had to really start praying, okay, are we
Is
his
this what we're
family?
doing? Yeah.
Are we his? This is not what we set out to do. We've already got 3 kids. Is this his family? And so we wrestled with that for a little while, and ultimately felt the peace that this is where he was supposed to be. And
Mm.
so we adopted him in January of last year.
Oh, wow.
So January of 2023, we adopted him. So it
Okay.
was just shy of 2 years uh,
Okay.
in the foster care system.
Yeah.
And at that point, we truly did feel
Done.
a piece. We're done. We're done. We've got 4. We've got a
Yeah.
teenager and a preschooler. Like we're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're real stretched wide.
Yeah.
And at that point too, Dwell, my sleep consulting business was really, really taking off wings. And so, this burden that I felt to really be involved in the foster community was being met in a different way.
Yeah.
And so now I'm still very involved in the foster care and adoption community. I just get to serve it in a different way.
Yeah. It looks different.
Um,
Mhm.
it looks different now, but
Mhm.
I think having those 2 paths is a really unique thing because I have experience in true adoption, like
Mhm.
from the moment of meeting and in foster care. And so all of these pieces kind of came together, I feel like in a very, I don't know, really intentional way. I think all of these things were putting me into the place where I've landed now,
Yeah.
working with a lot of these families on their sleep struggles.
Yeah. So
So,
so you have mentioned this a few times. Dwell came out
mhm,
of your own
mhm.
experience of sleep
Yep,
struggles with your son, and there
yep.
was nothing. So can you talk us through that and
Mhm.
how was Dwell born?
Yes, how was Dwell born? Dwell was born of a prayer. So
Okay.
there is a psalm that says, "In peace I lay down. You, O Lord, make me dwell in safety."
Mm.
And that was my prayer for my son for many, many, many years.
Oh,
Every
yeah.
single night I would pray that to him and just
Yeah.
say, I want him to, why is he not able to dwell in safety?
Yeah.
Why does he feel so unsafe? And without getting too much into his story, because that's not mine to tell, he has a history that told him being in the dark, being by
Mm.
himself, and being alone, that was unsafe.
Yeah.
All of those things were very, very big triggers for him. Nighttime was a big trigger for him, like many of our kids, like many of the foster adopted kids that I work with, whether they have neglect histories, abandonment histories. There's a lot of things that can make what is considered a normal
Yeah.
sleep environment very, very big triggers for
Yeah.
kids.
Yep.
And, all day long, he was this happy go lucky kid who was just thriving and loving life. And then we would get, kind of the sunset scaries. The sun
Yeah.
would start to go down and that pit in my stomach would grow. And I would just be
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, how bad is it going to be tonight? And he would grieve. He had a lot of nighttime grieving, which
Mm.
is, if you've experienced it, it is a different cry.
Mhm.
It is a different cry. It is a deep, soul cry
Mhm.
that is just gut wrenching to sit with your child in.
Yeah.
And you would just see, I mean, as we were moving towards his room through our, nightly bedtime routine, his face changed. Like
Yeah.
his whole countenance changed, his expression changed. And so he, as it turns out, had a two-sided coin. Um, he has a sleep disorder, which is
Okay.
very, very common with foster and
Mhm.
adopted children, called PLMD, periodic limb movement disorder, which looks a lot like restless leg syndrome,
Mhm.
but it happens when kids are sleeping. So you
Okay.
see this a lot with kids that are very like thrashy.
Yeah.
They kind of flutter kick their legs a lot. There's just this
Move,
incessant
move, move,
movement.
move. Yeah.
They're just moving
Yeah.
all the time. Even if it's just little micro movements of their fingers and toes, they're just moving all
Mhm.
the time, especially when they get into active REM sleep and at
Okay.
sleep cycle transitions. And so what we were running into was a two-sided coin, and it took us years. I'm giving you the
Yeah,
very broad,
the cliff notes,
it took
yeah.
us years to figure this out. But he had this sleep disorder. He had this physical condition that was causing him to wake up like
A lot.
10, 12 times a night after he fell asleep. And then he had his trauma
Yeah.
that was causing that wake up to be excruciating.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for him to, and what I didn't understand at the time, which I do know now, was that every time I went to him and I laid with him and he fell back asleep and I walked away, I was actually just creating more anxiety in him
Mhm.
because then I would be there, he would feel safe, he would wake up, I was gone, panic
Yeah.
every time. And we would do this dance 8, 10, sometimes 12 times a night.
Yeah.
And so we just went round and round and round for years.
Mhm.
And I took him to therapists for anxiety. He started going to play therapy when he was 4
Mhm.
years old. This started around the time he was about 2.5 or 3.
Okay.
Prior to that, he slept okay, but he was on allergy meds. He had a lot of medical stuff. So I honestly
Okay.
think he slept so well because he was
Yeah.
being with Zyrtec every night.
Yeah.
Um, but once we kind of got through some of that, and his awareness and his imagination and things like that began to really take off around
Mhm.
3 is when a lot of this really became magnified. And so I was taking him to a play therapist to work on anxiety because it
Mhm.
was literally like a Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah.
Like, who you saw in the middle of the night is not who you saw during
Yeah.
the day.
Yeah.
And he just didn't have any resources. And in that moment, other than, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay, I'm here,
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do.
Sure.
And so I found a TBRI therapist.
Okay.
Thankfully, there was one in my area who was
Yay.
wonderful. She was amazing. I love her. So she helped us through a lot of that. So that was one side of things, but we also, and I do this a lot with clients, we had to address both sides.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's what's missing a lot in the sleep world is we want to take it all to behavior or we want to make it
Yep.
all medical. And for so many of these kids, this
It's
population specifically,
yeah,
it's both.
both. Yep.
It's both. And so you can't, all the behavior modifications in the world won't correct a medical problem.
Mhm.
And all the medications in the world won't create felt safety.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I think that's where I landed in this space of, okay, I need somebody to help me bridge this
Yeah.
because what I'm learning in therapy and what the sleep medicine doctor is telling me to do aren't necessarily matching up.
Yeah.
And so how do we make sense of that? How do we take a trauma-informed approach to sleep science?
Mhm.
And that's really where I landed and what I am so blessed to get to be able to do now.
Mhm.
But it was a long journey to get here,
Yeah.
um, and to finally put things in place that made a difference for him.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you started Dwell in 2021
Mhm.
and had you done a lot of prep up until then so that you would just hit the ground running, or was it like I'm learning as I go? Like what did that look like?
It really was a lot of learning as I go. So
Yeah.
I went ahead and I got enrolled in a program that certified me as a pediatric sleep consultant because I knew I needed credentials. I didn't
Yeah.
want to be just kind
Yeah.
of one of those internet coaches
Yeah.
who, and I say that
No,
loosely,
yeah, I get
but
it.
you
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? One of those
Mhm.
TikTok experts who was
Yeah.
like, I know sleep, talk to me. I
Yeah.
wanted to have something, I wanted training. I
Yeah.
didn't want to just be like, I figured it out on my own. Let me show you. I
Yeah.
really wanted credentials. And so 2020, end of 2020, I started in getting my certified pediatric sleep consultant accreditation.
Got it.
So I got that. So I had over 200 hours of coursework in pediatric sleep,
Yeah.
in just diving in pediatric sleep. And so really that was really paired with a lot of life experience
Mhm.
on trauma informed care, a lot of continuing education through the TBRI Institute.
Mhm.
And so really, and I'm a little scrappy. I'm not going to lie to you.
Mhm.
I'm a little scrappy in the sense of there is a lot of trial and error, but I think a lot of people look at sleep consulting as like somebody who holds your hand while
Mhm.
you just cry it out.
Yeah.
And that's really unfortunate that it gets that rap sometimes,
Mhm.
because there's so much more to it than that.
Mhm.
And some of my earliest clients were like, I'm really nervous to work with you because I feel like you're going to tell me to do something that's not in my child's best interest or that I'm not comfortable with or
Oh,
whatever. And I was like, I would never. Like
yeah.
I would, and so it really is coming alongside families and saying, okay, what do we know about this child's history? That
Yeah.
shapes everything we do. What do
Totally.
we know about this child's temperament? That's a huge factor. Looking at where they are, where you want to go, and saying, is it even a realistic goal? for my child to sleep alone in a room by
Yeah.
themselves for 11 or 12 hours. Is that even realistic for this child? Or where could we make, really small incremental goals towards better sleep that are not overreaching quite so much? 'Cause, I'll be honest with you, my son is 9 now. He just turned 9, and he literally about a month ago started sleeping by himself.
Mm.
And for the
Yay.
last I know, yeah, I know, and I say that not to be like, "It'll take 5 years,"
But
but
it takes time. Yeah.
he got there in his own time, and
Yeah.
so we put different accommodations in place for the last 5 years to help him build that confidence. It's a lot of confidence building. It's a
Mhm.
lot of, working on reducing anxiety and just building that felt safety through time. It takes time, it takes repetition, it takes muscle memory. And so he actually, about a month ago, for the first time, was like, I want to sleep in that room.
Mhm.
I was like, awesome. And, so we sort of did a little like pallet on the floor type situation. And now he's moved into a loft bed and he feels safe because he's off the ground. And, he feels comfortable enough now to tell us what helps him feel safe and what
Yeah.
doesn't. So we're really, but he's, knock on wood, he has been for about 4, 5, 6 weeks in that room, sleeping beautifully all night. But he had to get there in
Yeah.
his own time. And that doesn't mean for the last 5 years we've done nothing.
Yeah.
We continue to support and encourage and build confidence. But also sometimes you just have to take that approach of like, okay, here's my goal. What could I take a step towards it?
Yeah.
As opposed to like, I need 3 days and we're sleeping
I
through the
know.
night.
I know. It doesn't work
Like,
like that.
it doesn't work that way. It
Yeah.
doesn't work that way. And that's a hard thing for parents to grasp sometimes too.
Well, I feel like that's probably the trauma aware side of things is like
Mhm.
helping families understand like if our kiddos have come from hard places and they have experienced adversity and trauma, then
Right.
the typical interventions with typically developing kiddos is probably not going to work.
No. No.
And so, it's like how do we help our families learn that um pediatricians mean well, but they don't
Ugh,
always have the best advice. And the
no.
books on, sleep training mean well, but like it doesn't fit. It's not like a cookie cutter. This fits in every
No.
situation. So I feel like
Exactly.
that's where the trauma awareness comes in.
Yes.
So what does
Yes.
that look like for you when you are helping families grasp that side of it?
Right, right. Well, God love him. I will never forget when we were very in the very early struggles with my own son, and I went to him. I think it was his 4-year checkup, and I was like, he was like, "How's he eating? Great. How's he sleeping? Terribly."
Hmm.
He gets out of his bed a million times a night, and he's scared and whatever. And he was like, "Oh, that's so normal. Have you tried a sticker chart?"
Mm,
And I went,
yeah.
I'm sorry, what? This is
Yeah.
not a sticker chart situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, God love me, he's not trauma informed.
Right.
Um, he's a great doctor, but he's not.
Yeah.
And so that was really when we escalated to neurology. But so what that looks like, obviously we're not going to look at band-aid approaches.
Yeah.
Really what that looks like for families is digging in. And a lot of the first, 15, 20 minutes with a family, I really just want to hear the kid's story. And
Hmm.
it's not that I'm trying to be invasive. It's not that I'm trying to pry or waste their time or anything like that. But really, that shapes so much of what we do
Hmm.
because, the way we respond or, quickly or slowly to a neglect child
Hmm.
is very, you know what I'm saying? So, like, I mean, if you have, depending on the child's history, that is going to shape our approaches.
Yeah.
And, if you have a kid with a very inconsistent first couple of years, a lot of that parental inconsistency that's happening overnight, they don't see it as being a trigger. But when you look at
Yeah.
that child's inconsistency,
Yeah.
you need to swing the pendulum the other way,
Mhm.
like to a T to help them feel safe. And so a lot of it is unpacking that history and saying, okay, this is a child who's experienced neglect.
Mhm.
So when we hear them in the middle of the night, we are going to respond quickly. We are
Yeah.
going to move towards them quickly because we want them to know very quickly that we are here and
We're
they're
right
safe.
there. Yeah.
and those types of things. And so it's really taking, okay, here's where we know what we know about them, and let's drive that forward, as opposed to maybe a baby that was adopted at birth. Not that they don't have any sort of trauma
Sure.
by any
Yeah.
means.
Yeah.
Of course they do.
It's just
But
different trauma. Yeah.
it's just going to look a little bit different.
Mhm.
That baby you might be able to respond to in a little bit slower manner and see if they
Mhm.
can maybe get themselves back to sleep as slowly walk towards their room.
Mhm.
With a baby who has a neglect history, we're not going to do that. We're going to
Mhm.
move quickly because that's going to actually make them feel safer. They don't need time to sort it out.
Mhm.
So it really is unpacking the history and then creating a plan that's unique for that child. There's nothing that's one size fits all.
Yeah.
I've been asked 1.5 million times to just create a course for
Yeah.
how to
You're like,
just create this
"Ah."
course for how to
Yeah.
sleep train a foster child. And I'm like, I will never.
Yeah.
You're I will never do that
Yeah.
because every child's wiring is different. So
Yeah.
I'm not even going to give you a formula like, okay, this is their story and they have a difficult temperament, you do this.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why I'm such a believer in the one-to-one,
Yeah.
in the one-to-one coaching, really unpacking that child's sleep associations, right? What do they need to feel safe enough to fall asleep? What are the conditions around them that they're working towards when they fall asleep? What is their sleep environment like, right?
Yeah.
What is their sleep pressure like? What is their schedule like? I mean, there's so many different moving pieces. So it's really a lot of fleshing all of that out because a lot of people just look at sleep as biology. Like
Yeah.
you're tired, you fall asleep. End of story.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's
No.
vulnerable. It's emotional. It's
Mhm.
a separation, which I think is one of
Mhm.
the biggest
Yep.
things that we miss.
Yep.
Um, and for a lot of kids, it's a trigger.
Yeah.
So it's really building up a lot of confidence in the sleep space itself. It's building in that predictability. It's bringing in a lot of nurture, providing them with structure and
Yeah.
consistency
That's
that they can
huge.
rest in. That's
Mhm.
huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. And one of the biggest red flags to me is when I get a family and I say, okay, they wake up in the middle of the night. What do you do? And the first thing they say is, well, sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, okay, pause. Put yourself in that child's shoes.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes they come quickly. Well,
And
sometimes I have
sometimes
to wait.
yeah.
Well, sometimes they lay with me. Well, sometimes they're mad at me.
Yeah.
If nothing else, you're creating confusion,
Yeah.
right? If not worse, right?
Yeah.
If not anxiety. And so, that structure and consistency piece is
Mhm.
crucial, especially for kids who have a much lower threshold.
Totally.
Um, than others.
Yeah.
And so it's all those different pieces that we have to work to put together. And it's not even necessarily that typically one piece is out of whack, it's that multiple pieces, right? We
Yeah.
need to kind of come at this from different directions.
Yeah.
And look at the science, but then look at the emotional and mental and all of that. Look at the connection, right? How much
Mhm.
of it is connection seeking
Mhm.
after they fall asleep? Are you proactively putting that in? Because I mean, the reality is that you're going to meet their needs one way or another.
Mhm.
So how can you be on the offense, right? How can you be proactively
Yeah.
meeting that need for connection instead of constantly
Waiting. Yeah.
reacting
Yeah.
to the difficult behavior
Yep.
that comes on the back end.
Totally.
So
Well,
it really is holistic.
and I feel like that I mean, yeah, I'm gonna say this. I feel like the top 3 things that come up for me are that when with the families I'm working with are getting the kiddo to sleep,
Mhm,
keeping them asleep,
mhm.
and then the early morning risers.
Yes. Yep, and
Would
I would
you
say that's the
agree?
top 3 that come up for
Okay.
me.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
yeah,
like, knowing that, I know that it's not a one size fits all and we can't do
absolutely.
cookie cutter,
Yeah,
but what are
broad
some, like,
strokes.
little nuggets that you could throw out there
Mhm.
for those 3 big those top 3? Like,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
someone's listening is like, "Just give me something to do tonight," right? Like,
right.
what would be
Absolutely.
just some little nuggets you could throw?
Yeah, absolutely. So getting to sleep. That is one of the top things that people call me for. They're like, it takes 2 hours for my kid
Yeah.
to go to sleep. And the biggest thing that I would say, the number one determining factor there is sleep pressure. And
Okay.
sleep pressure was something that I did not understand for a very, very long time as a mom. And I think number one, you have to know where your child falls with their sleep needs. Do they
Mhm.
have the average sleep needs? Do they have high sleep needs? Do they have low sleep needs?
Mhm. Yeah.
Right? and really thinking about their sleep needs, right? As like a pizza pie, right?
Mhm.
And if they are having a lot of daytime sleep,
Yeah.
that is a chunk. I
Yeah.
mean, I hate to break it to the 3.5, 4.5-year-old
I
parents, but
know.
their babies don't need naps.
They might not need it anymore.
They
I
don't.
know.
And if you're letting them nap for 2 hours, I'm sorry they're still up at 9, but you're
Yeah,
shooting yourself in the foot,
totally. Yeah.
right? I mean, and sometimes you have parents that have their kids in daycare, and daycare forces the 2-hour nap,
Yep,
and there's
they
nothing you can
do.
do about it.
Yep.
And so they're trying to put their babies to bed at 7 o'clock after a 2-hour nap, and they don't understand why they won't go down until 9. It's sleep pressure.
Yeah, okay,
It's
that
sleep
makes
pressure.
sense.
I mean,
Mhm.
that's the lowest hanging fruit for sure. But also understanding that, especially with lower sleep needs kids, even that 45 minutes to an hour might be killing them.
Mhm.
And, a lot of parents are, if I get a 4-year-old who's napping an hour, maybe an hour and a half during the day and won't go to sleep at night, they'll be like, yeah, but they're just such a bear at
Yeah,
5 o'clock. They have to have that nap. They don't. It's
I
a
know.
transition.
Yeah. I hear
Transition.
you, but also
I hear you. I have a 4-year-old. I get
Yeah.
it. But also, you have to push through
Mhm.
it. Get them outside, get them snacks, do some you have to push through it because you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
You can't have long naps and 7 PM bedtimes for
Nope.
most kids.
Yep. Yep.
You just can't. So, sleep pressure is the
Okay,
number one thing
that's
that I
good.
see off with going to sleep. Staying asleep is sleep associations.
Okay.
100% sleep associations.
Yep.
So sleep onset associations is another
Mhm.
way to say it. So essentially what these are, and this is a big aha moment for so many families that come to me. Look really, really, be really, really honest about what is happening around your child when they fall asleep.
Mhm.
What changes after they fall asleep? So if you are
Mhm.
laying with them all the way to sleep with an arm around your back and there's lights on, and then you remove that arm, you walk away and you turn off lights, a few hours later, when they hit a sleep cycle transition and they open their eyes, they are going to freak out
Yeah, because 'cause you're not
because
there.
the conditions around them changed
Mhm.
after they fell asleep.
Mhm.
So moving towards those sleep onset conditions being as constant as is reasonable. Now, with that said, there are kids who absolutely need your presence
Yeah.
to fall asleep.
Yep.
100%.
I
I'm
have one
certainly
of
not
those.
saying that's wrong. Yes, I'm certainly not saying that's wrong. However, there are little quarter turns that you can make to make it not be quite so dramatic.
Yeah.
Because what happens all night long is that we cycle up and down through periods of deep sleep and light sleep.
Yeah.
We fall asleep, we hit a deep sleep about 2.5 to 3 hours later, which a lot of people are like, yep, that's the first time I go in there.
Yeah.
You actually fully wake up. Sleeping through the night is not real. Nobody does it. I don't, you don't, your kids for sure don't.
Mhm.
Nobody does this. We all wake up every about 2 to 3 hours all night long. And in the early morning hours, even more frequently than that.
Okay.
The first half of the night, you're spending the vast majority of your time in deep sleep. So it's a little bit easier. And a lot of
Yeah.
parents will be like, yep, yep, to return your kid to sleep within the first 6 hours. So if
Yeah.
they go to sleep at 8, from about 8 to 2, the bulk of that is deep sleep. So
Yeah.
if they maybe wake up at 11, you can usually go in there, get a quick hand on their back, they're back to sleep in just a couple
Yeah.
minutes,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
After 2, right, you are spending most of that in active REM sleep, most.
Mhm.
And so it becomes this is the early mornings also.
Mhm.
This is where dreaming happens. This
Mhm.
is where nightmares happen. This is where all sorts of things can disrupt that. They become much more aware. They spend much more time awake in
Mhm.
those early morning hours. And so they may even sleep through that very first transition. They may sort of like look around and be like, yeah, I don't care. But
Yeah.
later on, when they're more awake, they're like, wait a minute, I
Yeah.
realized mom was gone. I realized she turns off my lights. That song that I was listening to isn't
Is
playing
over.
anymore.
Yep.
What the heck happened? Right? It would be the same as you and I falling asleep with our partner next to us, the lights off, covers on. A couple hours later, you wake up and the lights are off, your blankets are gone, and your partner's gone.
Yeah.
You would
Yeah.
be thrown.
Yeah.
And a lot of parents don't really consider it that way, but
Mhm.
it's exactly the same thing.
Mhm.
And so just as much as we would be thrown, they're thrown.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times those early morning hours, and so a lot of parents are coming in and recreating bedtime
Yeah.
multiple times a night.
Totally.
So they're coming in and they're having to lay with them again, and you have to scratch their back again, and then you sneak away, and then you come back and you do it
Yeah.
again. And so my biggest encouragement, if that is your issue, is to make little quarter turns,
Okay.
right? So really, really list it out. So if right now your kid is falling asleep with you next to them, being patted on the back with a lullaby playing that changes,
Yeah.
right? Make them more aware of those changes,
Yeah.
right? Peel them back like an onion, a little layer at a time. So rather than the patting all the way to sleep, intermittently just hold your hand still.
Yeah.
These things don't have to be hard.
Yeah.
Intermittently hold your hand still until eventually it's just a hand, until eventually it's
It
gone,
isn't. Yeah. That's good.
until eventually it isn't. Instead of laying with them, sit on the floor next to them.
That's
Sit at
good.
the end of the bed.
Yeah.
Move towards the doorway. You can gently move your position within the room. Now, I'm not saying they're not going to like it.
I know.
I'm
Yeah.
not saying they're going to enjoy all of this.
Yeah.
But if this is an unsustainable pattern, now
Yeah.
I'm a big believer if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Totally. Yeah.
If you're laying with your kid until they fall asleep at night and their sleep is
Stay.
unbroken and
It's
you're
fine.
cool with it,
Yeah. Yeah.
awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
I love snuggling with my kids until they fall asleep. I
Yep.
love doing that. But if I was in a situation where because I did that,
Yeah.
I was also
Then
doing it at 11 and 2 and 5,
yeah,
something
that's
would
a
have to
different story.
that's a
Totally.
different story. Something
Yeah.
has to give. So, who I'm speaking to here is those who are in that
Yeah.
pattern
Pattern.
of finding things that are unsustainable.
Yeah.
Right. And that's always the question for me. I don't ever label sleep associations as good or bad. It's are they
Yeah.
sustainable?
Yep.
And that's the crossroads you get to is
Yep.
this a sustainable pattern? And if it's not, then we make changes.
Yeah.
Right.
I have
Then we
I have
step in.
a yeah, I have a family right now that I'm working with sleep, and we've gotten to the point where kiddo is falling asleep better at night and sleeping now until about 1 and
Mhm.
then coming into bed with them, and they're okay
Yeah.
with that. Like they're
Yeah.
like, "No,
Yeah.
this feels like progress and we're good."
Yes.
Because before it was like a screaming tantrum until
Mhm.
we would just have him fall asleep in bed with us and we want
Yes.
our space for a minute. So
Yes.
like
Exactly.
that's progress, and they're like, "We're good right now. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's
And I have a lot of families that I work with. I did a training with an agency one time, and we were doing a Q&A, and the co-sleeping came up. And these were
yeah,
adoptive parents, not foster families. That's a
sure.
whole nother
It's a different
situation.
story. Yep,
But
yep, yep.
yes, this was adoptive only. But they were like, yeah, we've been co-sleeping for 7 days, and I'm just at my wits end. I'm so tired. And then this other mom hopped in and she was like, well, we only co-slept for 7 years. He'll outgrow it.
Oh my god.
So, like, everybody's threshold is so
Everybody's
different.
different. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
so different. This mom was done. It had been 1 week, 7
And
days.
she was
And
done.
this other
Yeah.
mom was like, "It was great. It only lasted 7
7
years."
years.
And so
Yeah,
that's the other thing. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't
yeah,
wanna create problems that don't exist
yeah, totally.
by any means,
Yeah,
by any means. So, but that is definitely something that if you are having, those every couple hour
yeah,
recreate sleep onset situations, being rocked to sleep, transferred,
yep.
having to re-rock again, transfer, right? You always see those Instagram reels of the guy ninja crawling out of
Yeah.
his kid's room,
Yes.
and they get to the door and the baby pops up, right? I mean, that's an issue. That's
Yeah,
the issue, right? Because
yeah,
they're hyper aware. And when you
yep,
have kids with trauma,
yep.
their
Even more
hypervigilance
so. Mhm,
antennas are so much more so.
mhm.
I mean, to the point where I've had kids who literally are like every 5 minutes, they turn
Yeah.
around. They're like, "Are
Where's
you
dad?
still there?" They
Where's dad?
pop up.
Yeah, yeah,
"Where's dad? Did you leave?
yep,
Are you still there?"
yeah.
And they will do that. And so it kind of then becomes, what's the approach here? But that's definitely the biggest thing to look at. So
Okay,
sleep pressure is huge.
okay,
Sleep pressure for sleep onset. Those sleep associations, if
okay.
you're having that
Middle of the
multiple
night.
waking every,
Mhm,
all times a night. And I think had somebody told me that when I was in my struggles,
mhm.
uh, in my misery of sleeplessness,
Yeah,
I would be like, "Oh my gosh, I've never thought about it that way."
yeah,
But
yeah,
how your child falls asleep is how they'll return to sleep at transitions.
yeah. Okay.
And I mean, I'm like, tattoo that on your head. Like,
Yeah,
how they fall asleep is how they will need to return to sleep if you've got a kid who
yeah.
is waking at those transitions. Now, again, not all of them do. But if you have a kid who's waking at those transitions, really focusing on sleep onset is going to make all the difference in the world.
Okay.
And then early mornings really come down to a couple things. One, sleep pressure,
Yep.
Sometimes you have a low sleep needs kid,
Yeah.
and
They're just
they
up.
really are only gonna do 10 and a half hours at night, and if you insist on a 7 p.m. bedtime, hello, 5 a.m.
Yeah, that's the
You know?
reality. Mhm.
That really is the reality. Other times, again, it's sleep pressure, but other times the reality is that they are massively overtired and
Mhm.
going to bed way too late.
Mhm. Yep.
So it really is kind of that dance of like, okay, is this just what he's capable of? And I can't tell you that. You got to look at your kid
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
really say, is he energetic? Is he participating during the day? Are there
Yeah.
dark circles under his
Yeah.
eyes?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you really got to know if they're, and I can't tell you if your kid's getting enough sleep. That's
Right.
really, you got to look at that.
Yeah.
Some kids are just meant to get, 9 or 10 hours of sleep and they're going to be fine. You
Totally.
know,
Yep.
preschoolers and up, I mean, not babies, but preschoolers and
Yep.
up are going to be fine with that. And then there are other kids, a 2-year-old who's not napping and getting 9 hours of sleep overnight is not enough, certainly.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but there are other kids. This is typically younger kids.
Mhm.
Older kids, I find it's usually just parental expectations are off.
Yep.
They
Yeah.
are parental expectations are sometimes just off, and
Yeah.
your oldest is 4 or 5, and you also have a baby, and you need everyone to go to bed at the same time.
I know. I
Unfortunately,
know.
that's
That's
a hard
so
pill to
hard.
swallow.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, your expectation for your 4 or 5-year-old might be off here.
Yeah.
They might not need as much sleep as your 1-year-old.
Yeah.
Really don't. Sleep
Yeah.
needs decrease as they get older.
Totally.
So looking at that is a big one. But for younger kids specifically, like under 3, a lot of times what I see is that period between the end of their nap and their bedtime is actually
Mhm.
too long.
Okay.
And so sometimes shortening that so they're going to bed already overtired,
Yeah.
which is making all of those transitions much more
Yes.
pronounced and dramatic.
Yeah.
So overtired babies sleep like junk. Um, Babies specifically,
Mhm.
older kids, it's not typically the problem. But looking at that like 3 and under crowd with the early morning waking,
Mhm.
typically going to be that last wakeful period is too long. So even pulling that back 15 to 30 minutes can often make a big difference
Yeah. Okay.
because they're going to bed overtired.
That's good.
Those are kind of the 2 primary things I see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. That's all super helpful.
Yeah.
And I
I
just
know,
know.
again, very broad strokes.
Yes, absolutely.
It's
Yep.
super broad strokes here.
Yep.
Um,
Um,
but yeah.
I just know that there is gonna be people listening that are like, "I need her in my life right now."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
do you work is it virtual? Like, because
Mhm.
I'm in Washington State, you're in
Yep.
Texas, and a lot
Yes.
of the people that listen to this currently are more in my area, Pacific
Yeah.
Northwest. So is that something where they could still work with you?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. So pretty much everything I do is virtual. So I
Okay.
do local occasionally. Honestly, I would say probably 90% of my clients are not local.
Yeah.
Most of what I do is virtual. So I do one-to-one consultations for foster families, adoptive families, bio families, kinship families, everybody.
Any
Uh,
family.
any family. It
All
does
the
not matter.
families.
Pet families. It doesn't matter. Blended
Yeah.
families. All the things.
Yep.
Um, but I have a lot of people refer to me because they get other sleep consultants will refer to me a lot because they are an adoptive or a foster family, and they're like,
Yeah.
"That's out of my scope," and I'm like,
Yeah.
I got you, I
Yeah.
got
That's my
you."
jam.
So yeah, exactly. Because no one else did it. So here I
Yeah.
am. So yeah, no, I would love to. Yeah. So
Okay.
everything I do is virtual. So I do one-to-one consultations. I do actually have an online course. It is not a sleep training course. It is just a healthy sleep foundations, trauma-informed online course.
Super
It's
important.
about
Yep.
2 hours long. That people can find. It is about 90 minutes worth of content where we
Mhm.
really unpack things like parasomnias, nightmares,
Mhm.
night terrors,
Mhm.
sleepwalking, those types of things. We really unpack sleep onset associations. We talk a lot about the impact of trauma on sleep,
Okay.
ways to build in felt safety and structure. And then at the end, I actually walk through 3 case studies. So
Okay.
these were actual families that I worked with, and I have an older infant, a preschooler, and a school age kid. I wanted to kind of give a range.
Yeah.
And so specifically what their issues were and how we address them.
Okay.
Um, so it's super helpful. So that's a
Yeah.
great place to start if you're sort of like, I don't necessarily need to sit down with you one-to-one, but I want to do more. I
Yeah.
want to do a
Yeah.
deeper dive here. That's a great option for families too. And then yeah, social media. I do
Yeah.
Q&A every Monday,
Yep.
and I
I love your
post
social media.
stuff on there.
So good.
But yeah, I work primarily one-to-one virtually,
Okay.
and so we can do extended support from that, or a lot of families just sit down with me one-to-one, and we'll chat for an hour, and I'll send you a plan, and they kinda DIY. They like to just kinda take it and
Yeah.
run with it.
Yeah, give
Um
me some info and then yeah.
Exactly, because a lot, especially with these foster and adoptive families, it's not necessarily a, like, day 1, do this, day 2, do
Yep.
this. It's not necessarily a prescriptive, because 'cause we're not sleep training.
Mm-mm.
We're really just working on fundamentals
Mhm.
and, things that are more long-term, big picture,
Yeah.
and so they don't necessarily need me to text them every single day or anything like that. It's
Yep.
more like, "Okay, how
Here's
do
the
we."
info. Yep.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then you kind of implement it and we can come back together if you've got other questions.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I'd love to be a resource for
Okay.
anybody who is looking for that.
Yep.
Dwell Pediatric Sleep is my name everywhere.
Okay.
So I have a very,
Perfect.
very small TikTok, but I'm mostly on Instagram. That's my
I
happy place.
I'm gonna have to find you on TikTok then. I love
I
your TikTok.
I Instagram is my happy
I
place.
know.
I
Yeah.
occasionally every now and then I'm like, "It's been 10 days. I should check my TikTok." But Instagram, I'm on every day.
That's
Instagram, I'm
funny.
on every
That's
day, but
awesome. Okay.
yes.
Okay.
So, but I'm in all the places as Dwell Pediatric Sleep, and
Cool.
that's not my first name. I've actually had people at conferences come running me down going, "Dwell, Dwell."
No, ma'am. Allison.
It's not my name. I started a series actually on my Instagrams that says, "Hey, Allison,"
Yeah.
specifically so
So
that
that
people would
people
know.
would know. That's
Would
awesome.
know my name
Oh my
because
gosh.
people are yelling at me at conferences thinking my name's Dwell, and I'm
Yeah.
like, "That's not my
That's
name. I know
so
that's how you know
funny.
me online, but that's not my name."
Oh my gosh. Okay, so well, we're wrapping things up, but I do have two
Yeah.
final questions for you.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely, shoot.
okay, so the first one is, what do you wish more people thought about when it comes to foster care and or adoption?
Oh, that's so good. I actually think I wish they wouldn't overthink it,
Okay.
honestly. I think ultimately foster care is a way to serve your community.
Yeah.
Period. If you have a heart for service, that's not to say that everybody should do it because I certainly
No.
don't believe
Nope.
that either.
Right.
Um, but if you have a heart for vulnerable kids, for vulnerable families,
And helping them
specifically,
come back together.
yes, if you
Yeah.
have a heart for bringing them back together,
Yeah.
um, and if you have a heart for serving those in your backyard, you don't have to go across the world
Yeah.
for vulnerable kids. They are
Right
in your
here.
backyard.
Mhm.
You don't have to do that. Also, foster care doesn't have to be a lifelong calling.
Mm-mm.
One
Yeah.
kid, help
Yeah.
one kid, one time,
Yep.
do respite for one family.
That's
It doesn't, it is all service. It is
mhm.
all service, and that's all it is. I think a lot of people overthink it. They
Mhm.
think if I become a foster family, this is like my new career. And
Mhm. Yeah. It
absolutely
doesn't
not.
have to be. Yeah.
Absolutely not. For some people, it is.
Yeah.
And for there are career foster parents, and we
Mhm.
need them. We need them. We need their expertise. We need their experience. We need to learn from them. We need them. But we also need to normalize foster care one time, one
Yeah.
family, one child,
Yeah.
uh, because that makes such an impact too. And if more people were willing to step in at once, I think a lot of the crisis that we're experiencing
Mhm.
would be
Hmm. Yeah.
would be lessened. Honestly, I think a lot of people are just afraid that it's going to become something that is forever. And,
Mhm.
and that's the season we got to. My youngest was starting kindergarten, and I had margin.
Mhm.
I had all 3 kids in elementary school when we opened our home, and I was like, "I have margin." I didn't wanna go
I've
back to
got
my
the
teaching job.
time.
I needed a
Yeah.
minute. And I said, "Hey, I've got 3 kids going to school 5 days a week. I have margin here, so I
Yeah.
I just wanna help. I just wanna step up and help, and this is a way I can help."
Yeah.
And so, looking at it in that, view.
Okay.
Um, Adoption, I think I would say I wish people really understood that it is not the antidote to infertility.
Yeah.
And I say that with love, and people are gonna
Yeah.
hate me for saying that.
No.
Um, but I think there are so many families that walk into adoption still grappling with the loss of infertility and looking at their child to fill that hole.
Mm.
A lot of pressure on a kid.
Mhm.
That's a lot of pressure on a kid.
Mhm.
And I think That doesn't mean that if you had infertility, you shouldn't adopt.
Right. I was just going to
But I
clarify
think
that. Yeah.
yeah, but I think you need to deal with your
Your stuff
grief,
first. Yep. Hmm.
deal with your stuff, deal with
Yep.
your grief, and understand that adoption is not your remedy.
Yeah.
Adoption is not going to fill it's not a replacement. It is two different things. And and a lot of people end up being, in my belief, called to adoption because they walked in fertility,
Hmm.
to be clear. But I think going into it as this is going to fix all of my hurt
Hmm.
is setting you up for failure, because adoptive
Yeah.
parenting is hard.
So hard.
It's
So
so
hard.
hard. It's so
Yep.
hard. And if you come into it with the mindset that it's unicorns and rainbows and that everything's going to be easy and this is just
Beautiful. And yep.
the cure for all of the years of hurt,
Yeah.
you're going to be hurt by it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going to be hurt by it. And so
Yeah.
deal with your stuff. Deal with your stuff first,
Yeah.
and don't look at your child as
Yeah.
the fix for your holes.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So last question. What would be 3 resources you would recommend to our listeners who,
Oh,
whether it has to do with sleep or not,
yeah.
parenting is hard, and what are 3 resources you would say, here's some things you can
Yeah.
try?
Yeah. Number one, connected child should be
Yeah.
your Bible. I
Yeah.
mean,
So good.
honestly, Bible, connected child. That is literally on my nightstand every single day of my
Yeah.
entire life.
Love it.
I read it about once a quarter. I
Okay.
force myself to read it once a quarter
Yeah.
because there are so
Get the
many things
refreshers.
I forget.
Yeah.
There are so many things that I forget just in the busyness and in the chaos and in the, I've lost my authority because I just don't want to deal with the meltdown.
Yeah.
Um, and it's such a good reminder.
Yeah.
Anything Karen Purvis,
Okay.
anything Karen Purvis is wonderful. Everything TBRI is my love language. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
So that should be 100% like required reading
Yeah.
um, for everybody.
For everybody. It doesn't matter whether you foster,
No,
adopt, or not. It's so
exactly. And
good.
if
Yeah.
you know a kid in your life who has
Yep.
walked through some sort of hardship, you should read
It's
it.
good.
It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be foster care and adoption.
Right.
Teachers, it should be required reading for teachers. 100%.
Yep.
Like, and I say that as a former teacher.
Yep.
Um, it should be required reading for anyone who works with kids,
Yeah.
in any capacity. What else would I say is a good resource? The Field Retreat is one of
Okay.
my favorite conferences for foster and adoptive moms coming
Okay.
up in February. I'm going to give that a shout
I
out.
haven't even heard of that one.
You haven't
Okay.
heard of Field? Oh,
No. I will
you need to
look it
know.
up and
I
I
have been
will
the last
put
2
it in the
years.
show notes. Okay.
Yes, I have been the last 2 years. I will go again this year. It's put on by Jamie Finn,
Oh,
Foster the Family blog.
I know her. How do I
Yeah,
not know about this? Wow.
it's put
Okay.
on by Jamie Finn.
My bad.
It is in Pennsylvania in February, so
Sure.
just get your mind right for the
Okay.
weather.
Yeah.
But you're inside the whole time, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But it is one of my favorite weekends of the whole year. There is equipping, there is teaching, there is fun, there is a lot of snacks.
Mm,
Um,
it's
you know,
important.
that's important. It really
Yeah.
is. It's that you don't have to prepare.
Yeah.
It is one of my favorite weekends of the year,
Okay.
so I always look forward to that, and I just think it's such an encouraging place. No one's gonna look at you and be like, "You're such a special snowflake. I don't know how you do it." Um, they're not, because they're all your people.
Yeah.
You're surrounded by women who get it,
Yeah.
and I just
Okay.
think that's such a great place to be. So I
Okay.
love the Field Retreat. I got to give a shout out for that. And then from a sleep perspective, um, gosh, let me think. Loveys.
Oh,
Loveys are my
yes.
favorite tool
Okay.
um, for kids from traumatic backgrounds.
Yeah.
One, because if you are a foster family and you can help build a lovey attachment,
Yeah.
it is a transient object that can
It can
travel
go
with
with them. Mhm.
it can go with them. And I think there's so much when they transition out of our home that is gone and hard.
Mhm.
And it is something that can instantly provide comfort. I think
Mhm.
every single kid in the foster care system should have a lovey of some sort. And you
Mhm.
should start building that attachment as soon as they turn 1.
Yeah.
Don't do it under 1 because it's not safe in their beds.
Yeah.
But as soon as they turn 1, I think every kid in the foster care system should have a lovey. And then for adopted kids as well, I think they're such powerful tools because they are transitional.
Yeah.
because they can go with them to preschool when mommy
Yep.
can't be there.
Yep.
Because and I think the biggest thing is I have a lot of families who are like, well, we have a few around, but they don't really attach to them. It does take intention.
Mhm.
It does take intention. You have to provide that in tandem with your comfort, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but I think it's such a powerful tool also because, again, going back to sleep associations, it is a constant.
Mhm.
It is something that
That will be there when they wake up. Yep.
them all night long and
Yep.
provide comfort. So it is my very favorite. I encourage every family to really build attachment if they can to some sort of security object, lovey, stuffed animal, blanket, something
Yeah.
that is a transitional object that can travel with that child. My 13-year-old still lays on a blanket.
Yeah.
Literally. I mean, I used to put it on my chest. I started this when he was really young. I would lay it across my chest and we would rock together. And he's still to this day, he is a 170-pound 5'8" teenager,
Yeah.
and he lays it across his pillow, and it goes on his face
Oh.
every single night when he goes to sleep.
Yep.
But it is a powerful sleep association. It's one of the first things I encourage families to add, especially if they're in a position where they need to pull things back.
Yeah.
If they're in a pattern of unsustainability where they need to pull things back, adding a lovey or security object first before you start moving some of those things away and building
Mhm.
attachment is hugely powerful.
Okay.
So
Cool. Well, I will
that was
put all of that in the show notes, everything we've talked about so people can find it
yes.
easily. I'll also link how they can find you so that they can find you easily and not have to
Yes,
come back and remember. So I really
absolutely.
appreciate you taking the time out of your day to chat with me. This is
Yes,
so
thank you for having
important.
me.
Yeah, of course. And I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing because as an adoptive mama myself, and we have dealt with sleep struggles with both my adoptive son and also my biological children.
Mhm.
It's hard. It's
So
really
hard.
hard. And
Yeah.
so I just want to thank you for the work you're doing. And
Thank
yeah.
you.
So anyway, okay.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope you have a fabulous week. It is Monday when we're recording this.
Yes,
You have a whole week ahead of you. I hope it's
yes,
great. And I will see you on the Instagram.
yes, for sure. Thank you again.
Okay. Thanks, Allison.